message that I am going to try and share with you is outrageous. It's absolutely outrageous.
Hello, and a very warm welcome back to the teaching series, The Jesus That John Knew. Thank you for being with me again. I do not take it for granted that you'll come back week after week, but I really thank you that you do, and thank you for the feedback that I've had on this series. It's really been encouraging. It would be remiss of me to start this episode without also thanking my dear friends Paul and Debbie Rowlands from out there in Chatham in Canada. I hope you noticed the shirt that I'm wearing today, Paul and Debbie. They sent me a lovely gift over the Christmas period saying the only one thing wrong with your Jesus the John Knew videos is you don't have a Canadian shirt, so let's fix that for you. So here it is, my Canadian shirt. So thank you very, very much for that. I'm most proud to wear it, and I hope I'll have a chance to wear it in Canada again soon. Alright, well now, let's turn to our Bibles again, because we're in John chapter 18. We're coming to the end of the Gospel really, but there's still quite a lot of stuff for us to discover. And we talked last time, if you remember, about Simon Peter, and we saw that awful anguish of Simon's, where he denied the Lord 3 times after the bravado of saying, oh, well, I'll be with you right until the end. And I made the point that really, and it's a crucial point I think, which was to say that the whole purpose and the whole point of the salvation message is that Jesus doesn't save us from death. On the contrary, what he does is he saves us in death. And I think it was actually Peter's death, Peter's dying to himself and his own self-effort and his own ability to, you can count on me, I'm your guy kind of Christianity, that really brought Peter to himself. And that really is a most important key. But now, Jesus finds himself brought to Pilate. And we're going to pick up the story in John chapter 18 and verse 28. And it says this, that then they led Jesus from the house of Caiaphas to the governor's headquarters. It was early morning. They themselves did not enter the governor's headquarters so that they would not be defiled, but could eat the Passover. That's rather sweet. In its own way, that's kind of interesting that this is the obsession, this is the bizarre part of religion. So it's okay to bring a man who is the king of the Jews, who is God, by the way. It's okay to bring him and hand him over for somebody else to kill and to put him to trial, but you don't enter into the house of Pilate because you wouldn't want to infringe the law, so you'd be okay to eat the Passover, which is pretty bizarre stuff. But anyway, there it is. So Pilate went outside to them and said, "What accusation do you bring against this man?" And they answered him and said, "If this man were not doing evil, we would not have delivered him over to you." And Pilate said to them, "Okay, well take him for yourselves and judge him by your own law." And the Jews said to him, "It's not lawful for us to put anyone to death." This was to fulfill the word that Jesus had spoken to them, to show what kind of death he was going to die. Well, again, the point is well made. Now, we've now got Jesus in front of Pilate. And we're going to hear an interesting interview. So let's see what Pilate says. So Pilate entered his headquarters again and called Jesus and said to him, "Are you the king of the Jews?" Now, watch the nature of the question. Pilate's saying, "Oh, look, let me see if I get this right. Here's a group of Jews, and they brought you to me for judgment. Are you the king of the Jews or what? Because I've got to be honest with you, you don't strike me like a king. I mean, kings have palaces. I mean, kings have great wealth. I mean, I don't know. Kings don't typically come before me in this manner. I mean, this doesn't feel to me much like a state visit. Do you know what I mean? And frankly, you don't strike me as much of a dignitary. So, are you the king of the Jews?" Jesus replied, "Do you say this of your own accord? Or did others tell it to you about me?" And Pilate answered him, "Am I a Jew? Your own nation, the chief priests, have delivered you over to me. What have you done?" And Jesus said, "My kingdom is not of this world. If my kingdom were of this world, my servants would have been fighting that I might not be delivered over to the Jews. But my kingdom is not from this world." And Pilate says to him, "So you are a king then?" And Jesus answered, "You say that I am a king. For this purpose I was born. For this purpose I have come into the world, to bear witness to the truth. Everyone who is of the truth listens to my voice." And Pilate said, "What is truth?" And after he had said this, he went back out and told the Jews and said to them, "Look, I find no guilt in him. But you have a custom that I should release one man for you at the Passover. So do you want me to release to you the King of the Jews?" They cried out again and again, "No, not this man, but Barabbas." Now Barabbas was a robber. And here's the heart, really, of this particular part of the story. The question is, what is truth? And I think sometimes that for us as believers, it's what we understand to be truth is the very thing that is keeping us from the truth. So you have this interesting problem of the Jews not wanting to infringe any Sabbath laws, because to them it's a truth. But the truth, and in fact, let me put it like this, the very things that we believe and the very way that we've been taught to believe prevents us from knowing the one in whom we say we believe in. And this is an excellent example of that. Pilate says, "What's truth? You're talking about this mystical kingdom. You're telling me that if you were a king here, you would have all these subjects that fight for you, but you don't have subjects that fight for you. I don't understand it." Clearly you've done nothing wrong, Pilate says, and Pilate's going to be a little unnerved. We're going to have Pilate's wife has a dream, and she'll come to her husband and say, "You just do not do anything to this man. I'm telling you, be careful about this man." And so Pilate knows there's something going on here. And so Pilate thinks, well, let me play the hand. So what I'll do, says Pilate, is why don't I offer up, give a choice, because on Passover, somebody is always set free. You see, the custom of the Jews was to release somebody at the Passover. It's the kind of the kingdom of this world principle. But what's really interesting is that if the custom of the kingdom of this world was to release someone from death at the Passover, the point of the Passover in the kingdom that is above is to release humanity from death in the Passover. So someone was going to be sacrificed at the Passover that would release the rest of us from death, which is an amazing idea. And so he says, well, what about Barabbas? Now we can learn about Barabbas by going to Matthew 27. John just makes the point, Barabbas was a robber, is how he puts it. But in Matthew 27, where are we now? Matthew 27, verse 11, I think. Matthew 27, Matthew 27, where are we now? Yeah, that's right, Matthew 27 and verse 11, let's read from there. Now Jesus stood before the governor, and the governor asked him, "Are you the king of the Jews?" And Jesus said, "You have said so." But when he was accused by the chief priests and the elders, he gave no answer. And then Pilate said to him, "Do you not hear how many things they testify against you? But you gave him no answer, not even a single charge." So the governor was greatly amazed. Now at the feast, the governor was accustomed to release for the crowd any one prisoner whom they wanted. And they had a notorious prisoner called Barabbas. So when they gathered, Pilate said to them, "Whom do you want me to release for you, Barabbas or Jesus, who is called Christ?" For he knew it was out of envy they delivered him up. Besides, while he was sitting in the judgment seat, his wife sent word to him, "Have nothing to do with that righteous man, for I have suffered much because of him in a dream." Now the chief priests and the others persuaded the crowd to ask for Barabbas and to destroy Jesus. The governor said to them again, "Which of the two do you want me to release for you?" And they said, "Barabbas." And Pilate said to them, "Then what shall I do with Jesus, the one who is called the Christ?" And they said, "Let him be crucified." And he said, "Why? What evil has he done?" But they shouted all the more, "Let him be crucified." Well, I want to just spare a moment, because imagine somewhere locked away in the dungeons of the governor's palace, wherever they were. You've got Barabbas, this notorious villain, this picture of sin, this picture of infamy, this picture of of lostness and lastness and leastness. And there he is sitting in his cell, and he can hear a commotion going on outside, a tremendous commotion going on outside. And all he can hear is Barabbas, 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 Barabbas. And now listen, let me tell you, Barabbas knows very well what day of the year this is. Barabbas knows it's Passover, and Barabbas hears his name being chanted with such passion and such a vigour and such excitement. Barabbas, Barabbas, Barabbas. I mean, surely the only thing Barabbas could conclude is that the question that has been asked, who do you want me to crucify? This man Jesus or this man Barabbas? And their response is, crucify Barabbas, Barabbas, Barabbas. And they shout and they shout and they shout. And eventually the jailer heeds the governor accedes to their request. Barabbas! And the great cheer goes up. It's going to be Barabbas! And the cheer goes up, and the people are screaming and celebrating and shouting and what have you not. And Barabbas must have been sitting in his cell going, oh boy. Okay, this is my moment. I knew this would happen, and this is fine. This is the way it goes down. And, you know, I was a murderer, and I've been a notorious robber and a villain and so forth. And now the world will exact its revenge, and there you have it. What can one do? And then you hear the locks turn in the outer doors, and the chain with all the keys like rattle, and the sound of the guards as they march towards Barabbas' cell. Maybe Barabbas had rehearsed this moment over and over and over and over in his mind. Now the moment had finally come. The key goes into the lock of his cell, and the lock turns with a thud. There the guards stand over Barabbas, and Barabbas' purpose is to be brave. Purpose is not to give them the satisfaction of crime. Maybe purpose is not to give them any sense of satisfaction. And outside you can still hear the faint tones, Barabbas, Barabbas, Barabbas. And the guards motion towards him. He steels himself maybe for one last moment of defiance, if you will. And then the guard leans down and unlocks the chains that are around Barabbas' arms. And Barabbas says, what? And then unchains his feet. And Barabbas says, okay, maybe they're gonna, and he looks around and there's half a dozen guards, and he assesses the situation and wonders where he'll be able to move because they've got sticks and buttons, or maybe they're gonna beat him to death before they crucify him, and he just kind of prepares himself for that. And then the guard says, Barabbas, you're free to go. What? Are you kidding me? And here's the crowd, Barabbas, Barabbas, Barabbas. Barabbas, you're free to go. Barabbas says, I'm free to go? Yes, you've been chosen as the one that would be released this Passover. Barabbas says, me? To be free? But I'm a sinner. But Barabbas, you didn't know that you were going to be a picture of grace. That Christ died even for the most ungodly of us. That there you are, and Christ will die in your stead. What an extraordinary picture of grace, but also what an extraordinary picture of religion. That religion would save the lawbreaker and kill the lawmaker. Not that I would call him a lawmaker in that sense, but it's ironic, isn't it? That here is Jesus, the one, the King of Kings, the Lord of Lords. How ironic. But imagine Barabbas as he kind of tries to figure out the rest of his days. Imagine what that must be like. Sitting there scratching your head thinking, how in the world did it ever come to be that I was the one that was released? Barabbas, there's no repentance required of Barabbas. There's no suggestion that Barabbas will do anything other than go back and live a life where he's a terrible robber. But nonetheless, he's been released and Christ has died in his place. And in a very serious way, that is the story of the gospel. That there you were, thinking to yourself, it was definitely you that was going to die. With all the time that you were wondering about that, the truth of it was that Jesus was dying in your place. It's a wonderful and simple illustration of the gospel. No more, no less. But Barabbas will go free while Christ goes to the cross. And we'll pick up the story next week with Jesus headed towards the cross. Flint-faced, focused, knowing what he's come to do. Oh, more than a king. And knowing the answer to Pilate's question, what is truth? It's an esoteric question, you see, because the question isn't really what is the truth. The question is, who is the truth? And Jesus says, I am the truth, the life, and the resurrection. Until next time, God bless you. Bye.
Everybody I know who really gets this message at a gut level has been to hell and back. I don't know anybody that really gets this that's not been in the slough of despond, in the depths of hell. And it's only when you're down in the depths of hell that you can come to that grace moment. You see, grace isn't just some cute little theology. That's not what it is. Grace isn't for the strong. Don't think grace is for the strong. It's not even for the weak, because if you say you're weak, you're saying you've got some strength. Grace is for dead people. Grace is for people that have got nothing and nowhere else to go, who are finished, who are down and out, who are over. It's finished. It's for people who are in the wilderness. You find grace, Jeremiah said, in the wilderness. That's where you find grace. When you're in the wilderness, in the midst of despair, and there's nowhere for you to go, that's when you hear the voice of grace. And this young man is in the wilderness. He's in despair. And the Bible says, and the famine came on him. Watch this. Sometimes people come to me and they say, oh, I'm struggling. And I'm thinking, no, you're not struggling. You're not there yet. Because I know full well that when somebody's sinking, they've got to hit the bottom. Because when they hit the bottom, they can get some traction and spring back up again. But you've got to hit the bottom. But the problem is you don't know how deep your self-reliance gets. You don't